A man hooked on cocaine, alcohol, and other abusive drugs. Destroys his life, his marriage, and his career. Then a saint and Jesus show up.
Restoring hope, open my heart to sing, taking the darkness inside, revealing your light, restoring hope, open my eyes to see the world through different eyes, revealing your light, restoring hope.
It's the 9th of June on the Lord's year 2013. 5 minutes past the hour. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and this is RestoringHopeLive.com. If this is your first time listening to this is a program about dealing and working and healing people's hurts, habits, and hang-ups. It might be alcohol or drug related. It might be sexual abuse. It might be emotional abuse. It might be something that's happened in a family. It's wherever you get stuck in life and things start to go wrong. Well, what we do on this program is just hope. We hope that some of the stories that you hear on this program, there's something that God wants you to hear. The story that you have with the Lord is your DNA with Him. And it's particular between you and Him only. But there's something out there that perhaps our guest today has gone through that God wants you to hear. So give me an hour, and hopefully we'll maybe not change your life, but maybe we'll bring you a spiritual experience in helping you grow in the life that God wants you to have. My co-host today is Dr. Reverend Michael Hartwig. How are you?
Doing great. Wonderful.
And, of course, we have Joe Mines, who is a recovery specialist.
Good enough.
Fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Bob Montserrat, the cat in the hat who watches the chat. He's also a forensic scientist. And what we mean by chat is you can also go online to RestoringHopeLive.com, and there's a chat button, and you can join us on chat and communicate with us that way. Also, we have Chris and Eric producing the show today, and I want to introduce you to my special guest. I got to admit, I love this man. I've known him for a little over 3 years. We found each other in recovery and in the middle of a Christ-centered men's Bible study, but his story is, I'm not worthy to hear his story. And this will be like the third time I've heard it, so just sit back and enjoy. Mike Jansen. Mikey, how you doing?
I'm great.
You got to get closer to the mic. Kiss that mic like you're kissing your beautiful daughter's cheek. All right, so you had it all, didn't you? I mean, you had the drugs, you had the alcohol, you screwed up a career, you ruined a marriage.
Yeah, I was a wreck.
Yeah. Let's start out in your 20s someplace where you really began to abuse alcohol and drugs.
Yeah, I drank. I grew up in a German town in Michigan, and that's kind of what you did growing up. It was acceptable socially. Never ever thought that the way that I drank early on was problematic. I was just doing what everybody else was doing.
Where in Michigan?
I grew up in a town between Flint and Saginaw called Frankenmuth.
Oh, yeah.
Big
yeah,
German.
There's a Christmas place there, isn't there?
That's right.
Yeah.
The world's largest Christmas store and the two largest...
that would drive anybody to drink, wouldn't it?
Christmas 300
yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Well, it was a good place to grow up,
Sure.
In a very Christ-centered community. And I grew up with, I went to a Lutheran grade school, but the drinking was just acceptable. And it's just what I did. I played sports, and I played sports on varsity as a sophomore. So that means that to fit in, early on, that's kind of...
So basketball, football, track?
Everything. Yeah, basketball, football.
Did you wrestle?
And track. I didn't wrestle. We didn't have wrestling at the school I was at.
Sure.
It was a smaller school, probably about 600 students
It
or
doesn't
so.
matter. The Olympics doesn't want it either way.
Yeah.
So,
People in Detroit don't want it either. Yeah, who cares? Of course, they don't have a basketball team either, do they?
So in your 20s, you're using alcohol. Any drugs?
not really.
Okay.
Not really. I experimented a little bit in college, but it was the drinking. But, when it started to shift from social to a coping mechanism was really when, I had what I termed and defined as a high-pressure job, a stressful job.
What was it?
Well, back what I used to think was, I was running the AAU Junior Olympic Games at the age of like 22 years
So
old.
you were working with young people All the time, and you have a drinking issue.
Well, closet maybe.
Sure.
You know, the beginnings of how I drank.
Right.
You know, looking back on it now, at the time, I didn't think there was anything abnormal about it.
Yeah.
Note to audience. What was your job again?
Well, I was the event director for the AAU Junior Olympic Games
For the United States.
for the United States.
Okay, just note that how incredible this man's career was growing.
That's a big deal. I think.
Yeah, mid-20s, he's running the junior AAU.
Yeah, and I you know, that's also part of the problem for me is that it stroked my ego too. You know, as I used to tell people, you know, that as I progressed career wise, that nobody else in America had my job. You know, and that fed, you know, my ego. That fed, you know, the pressure that I put on myself.
So were you an intense guy to work for?
Oh boy, yeah, still am.
Yeah.
Still
I
am.
bet.
It's a
I
character
know a
defect
couple
of
guys
mine.
that work for him, and he's a good boss. He's then and now, but now he's better.
Yeah, but doesn't
But
it
he's
run?
still tough.
Compulsive behavior though runs in tracks. I mean, if you're going to be compulsive about drinking, you're probably compulsive in other areas.
Yeah,
Is that right?
and I like to control outcomes still to this day a little bit.
yeah.
Like I said, that's still a character defect. I am still a work in progress.
Yeah.
So-
Is that typical, Joe? Do you find that when you're working with all these people strung out on drugs and stuff? I mean, do you have compulsive people? Is that true?
Everybody's compulsive.
To some degree.
I don't see any difference in addicted people and non-addicted people. I mean, find one that's not.
Well,
you know, I mean, everybody has this false notion that if you're an addict, you're all the same. It's just not true. I mean, I've met people from every walk of life, every personality type, everything. Just doesn't matter.
Do you find that people who don't work just 40 hours a week, like they're working 80 hours a week, does that tend to lead to addictive behaviors like over alcohol? Or
If it's not healthy, it depends on what's going on. I know my dad works 80, 100 hours a week and always has, and probably has more self-control than anybody I know.
I see.
Okay, Mike Jansen is the guy we're talking to here. Mid-20s, he's running the United States' junior AAU league. When does drinking go from social to coping?
Basically, when I start to get a six-pack after everybody's left the office for the day, and I still know I've got 3 or 4 hours left to work, you know, and I'm there in my office by myself with a six-pack next to me and drinking to take the edge off.
Okay. Did those containers of alcohol ever get transferred to an automobile while you drove down the road?
Yeah, for sure. That's something that I always did, you know, and it's amazing to me looking back on it now. I actually had some pretty near-death consequences at the age of 16 years old. I've got a scar right here to show for it from drinking and driving, and that still didn't stop me. I just still, at that time in my life, still felt like I was utterly indestructible.
All right, give us 30. You're married?
I get married, moved and relocate to New Orleans after I left the AAU. There, I met my first wife working on an event in New Orleans. She was a recent college graduate. So now you shift gears to New Orleans, where
You're running events down there, too.
I'm running events down there. I shift jobs. Now I'm working for a sports commission, and my job is to bring sporting events to Metro New Orleans and then fully execute them. So we were the host committee for Super Bowl and the 2002 Super Bowl, the post 9/11 game, the 2003 Final Four, the Bassmasters Classic, all kinds of youth junior Olympic championships. That job, the people that I worked for loved it. Life was pretty good then. You know, the alcoholism was not, you know, in full bloom yet, and covering that up was where I lived. You know, in New Orleans, it was very socially acceptable. It was part of the culture. You know, it's kind of just, again, it was what you did. And then you factor in the hospitality aspect of my job of entertaining clients. Again, you know, you're doing it way too much, but not realizing it.
One of the top jobs in America, and Mike Jansen has it. A rising star in the sports management world. Alcohol was beginning to seep into his life. He had a good marriage. Soon comes drugs, and then the biggest fall in a lifetime, right before a Super Bowl. We'll have Mike Jansen's story as we continue live today on RestoringHopeLive.com. Feel free to look us up on the website, and the shows are always archived there. And we're brought to you by St. Gregory's Retreat Center. If you really ready to quit and you need that help, Call St. Gregory's.
Restoring hope.
Well, for me, it was alcohol. For you, it might be drugs. I'm J. Michael McCoy with Joe Mites from St. Gregory Retreat Center. Joe, you say St. Gregory Retreat Centers are different. What's so unique about your approach?
Well, first of all, St. Gregory Center is more of an intensive training program than just an addiction recovery center. We help our clients set some very ambitious goals for their lives by focusing more on empowerment and leadership, physical health and healing, and a life of virtue. This goes far beyond mere sobriety, which frankly is why so many more of our clients achieve just that.
Can you give me some more examples of how, St. Gregory does this?
Absolutely. First of all, we believe you need to be well enough to recover. For this reason, every guest will spend at least a week with our medical team preparing physically for that recovery. This involves our proprietary IV neurorestoration therapy, as well as very specific nutritional regimens.
So once someone begins to heal physically, then what?
Well, now we begin the real work on teaching them how to reevaluate this process of events in their lives and to better understand why they think and feel the way that they do. Our program teaches how to change your thinking, how to modify your behavior to obtain better outcomes, and we really focus on teaching the life skills needed to truly find a life of purpose, joy, and fulfillment.
Wow. Okay. That I've heard enough. I need to get a hold of somebody. Tell the listeners how they can get a hold of St. Gregory Retreat Center.
You can reach out to us at 888-778-5833. We have counselors standing by at that number. Again, that's 888-778-5833. You can also do a Google search for St. Gregory Retreat Center and find us that way. Or you can go to your website at restoringhopelive.com and click on our logo.
Hi, this is John Butter. A parent said to me, "My kid is on drugs. I need a support group. How do I find one?" Well, if you have a kid who's abusing drugs and you're willing to go to a support group, I congratulate you. Lots of parents are unwilling to go get help from other parents. When my wife and I were in the midst of accepting the truth that drugs had invaded our family, we were advised to go to a support group. And the drug counselor who gave us this advice said, "You may have to go to more than one group before you find the group to which you can relate. This can take a lot of work and effort, but we thank God that we found a group. We found a group of people where we could share, whose experiences were more advanced than ours, who told us that God was still alive, He was still working in our lives and our kids' lives, and frankly, we would not have survived without that group. It was a help."
Visit lighthousenetwork.org.
Here's Dan Celia with today's Stewardship Moment.
I'm not sure the Word of God is received or believed as it should be today. I certainly have my opinion, but I do know this, that there is nothing more important in the world today than for a clear, well-defined, scriptural declaration of the gospel, particularly the gospel of the grace of God. But what about the gospel? See, we have a responsibility as believers to support those efforts that are proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. I hope as you reflect on your stewardship that you would reflect on the proclamation of the gospel.
You've just heard a Stewardship Moment with Dan Celia of Financial Issues Ministry, helping you plan, give, and invest wisely. For more information, log on to financialissues.org. That's financialissues.org.
Restoring hope. Open my heart to sing. Taking the darkness inside. Revealing your light. Restoring hope.
A man at the peak of his career. Alcohol is already being abused. Drugs come soon. Mike Jansen is my guest today on RestoringHopeLive.com. So at what age did alcohol become an issue?
Shortly after probably 30,
Okay.
32,
And you're in
33.
New Orleans at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when do drugs come into it?
About 33, 34 in New Orleans.
Okay.
Yep.
And started with cocaine?
Yeah, and really, the cocaine was really the only thing that I really abused deliberately. You'll hear later on in the story there was an accident waiting to happen, but it was in New Orleans. It was I think I was about 33 at the time.
Happily married.
Happily married. There was some issues there. Part of it probably had to do with the drinking. Part of it just had to do with not having Christ at the center of it, looking back at that now. But what happened was one day, I had switched jobs after the Super Bowl in 2002. That event was very gratifying. Went off smoothly after all of the challenges that the city of New Orleans and the NFL faced post 9/11. Probably the most rewarding event that I had ever worked on, and the people I worked with I love, and still they're my friends today. But I took another job, and that new job was on the other side of the Mississippi River on the West Bank. So actually relocated, moved over to where I live, bought a new house over there. That job was a lot less stressful in such that I was only working maybe 35 to 40 hours a week. It was actually a government job. I was a general manager of a sports facility. So at the time, my wife at the time, she had shifted jobs, and her job was more demanding. She's working more hours. I'm working less, and I got time on my hands. So, that's when I started to drink just to drink.
In the morning?
Well, it was really more after work. I'd get done at 4:30. My wife at the time wouldn't get home till 7 maybe. Mm-hmm. So I had 3.5 hours to kill. So I started drinking at home. I started driving around. And that was when I also had shifted to starting to drink liquor. Before it was beer, but that beer would make me too full. So I started to drink vodka, and started to keep it and hide it in places too, to kind of not alert my wife at the time of how much I was truly drinking. I
just want to interrupt here for just a second, Joe. How common is that?
That one is common.
I mean, I just laugh about fifths of vodkas being put in toilet tanks and behind books on a bookshelf, right? Mm-hmm. Where was your favorite hiding place?
Well, part of it was the freezer. I got a funny story about the freezer. I would keep it in the freezer, but I would. First time I tried to I made the mistake of actually putting water in there, and trying to. Make her think I wasn't drinking as much as I was drinking, except the problem is that the water froze.
Yeah, and then burst the glass.
So that's when I actually ended up starting to hide it. The laundry room was a good place. I had a place out kind of in the garage in a little cul-de-sac back there. It shifted.
Mike, she knew you were drinking, though, correct? Because she could smell it on your breath.
Yeah. Looking back on it today, probably, yeah.
And that's the reason why you were hiding it, right? I mean, she was harassing you because she was...
Yeah.
She
Saw what was happening was just there wasn't enough focus on her, and she could see that. I wasn't paying any attention.
What do you mean by that? She was...
Well, I was so consumed on when I was going to be able to have my next drink, and so it revolved around my work, and then as soon as quitting time was where and how and when was I going to be able to have that drink.
Right.
So, when that's the case, you're not being the kind of husband that you're supposed to be to your spouse.
You're listening to the show and that relates to you, just keep it to yourself for a moment. You might be with your family in the car or listening with somebody else. Just note that what Mike just said is that you just wanted to keep it to yourself because, you didn't want to interfere with anybody else. So you isolate drinking, which is just, do we all end up isolating before we given up?
Yeah, I think so. It's pretty actually uncommon where somebody doesn't feel that there's an issue coming on. And when you know that to be true is when you start hiding it and when you start really kind of looking for those sneak away spots to go out because it's probably borderline and you want to keep it at that phase as long as you can.
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
And at this point, you didn't think you had a problem.
Not really.
She saw it though.
She would just kind of casually say, you think maybe you're drinking a little bit too much or let's go do this or do that. And that's, if we were going to go out and socialize, part of my routine was getting as many down as before you could go do that. And in New Orleans, that was a big part of what we did. Yeah. We had a group of friends and what we did was revolved around drinking, whether it was crawfish boils or going down to the French Quarter to have dinner and then go out down to Bourbon Street afterwards or whatever the case was. Like I mentioned earlier, that it was very socially acceptable in New Orleans. And I had never been exposed to any kind. Nobody ever intervened and said, "I think maybe you have an issue." Right. And maybe part of that was just because where we lived at the time.
And that translated into cocaine.
Yeah, I mentioned before, too much time on my hands.
Right.
So I was on the west bank of the Mississippi. That's where I lived. And, one afternoon after work, I was driving around, stopped by the liquor store where I normally would get my vodka, and I was propositioned there by a gentleman who basically asked me if I wanted to buy some dope. And at the time, I didn't even know what he was referring to, and he said dope, And so he had to kind of explain to me, and then it kind of registered that it was crack cocaine. I didn't know how to do it, and basically what he did is he invited me back. Right, the liquor store, right behind the liquor store, was kind of one of those hourly hotels. One of those places that you would never in a million years think that you would frequent.
Right, you're way above that.
Fast forward, another year or two, that ended up becoming where I did most of my damage. But so I'm the kind of person that likes anything that makes me feel good. And, I remember back in college, I had tried cocaine powder one time and liked it so much that it scared me. And I had never done it again up until this moment in time. For whatever reason, I made a choice that day to try it.
Where's Jesus?
I don't think this story is much different than a lot of people, but, I mentioned that I went to a Lutheran grade school. As soon as I never had Jesus in my heart. I had Jesus in my head.
Did you go to church, you and your wife?
No.
No,
As soon as I went away to college, and I went to a Lutheran institution, I went to Valparaiso University, and I didn't go to church one time because I chose to. I went to church maybe once or twice when my parents were there. I just left God behind.
So you're racking down some highballs on Bourbon Street, and somebody says, "Are you a Christian?"
I would have said, absolutely, but I just, my actions certainly didn't reflect, what I espoused to be.
What's that Bible verse? Something about false salvation. We think we've got it, but we don't. Without. No. Okay.
I
think it's in Timothy.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, so I was shown, how to actually use the drug crack, and
so you came back there and he walked you through that?
Went back into the hotel room, dingy, just an awful
So you
place.
met a random guy on the side of the street, and he said, "Hey, you want to buy some crack from me?" And you basically say,
I said, I don't know how to do it. Maybe I'll try it. I'll try it, and I tried it. And, even right now when I think about it, this is kind of why I know that I'm still, not cured completely, that I need Jesus and I need recovery. You think about what that first hit was like. That's what I chased for 3 or 4 years, that very first hit of that drug, and you don't lose it. It's both physical and mental. It did something to my head.
So you're still a high operating business person with upper income, married, but your secret world behind is filled with alcohol and crack cocaine.
Yeah, the use of the crack in New Orleans, I think if less than 5 times in New Orleans, didn't become an issue there. The drinking still did. Had a few consequences here, a lot of really, really nasty fights with my spouse at the time. But, that mental obsession in the back of my head, like, man, the next time I'm going to get a chance to do this, I think I will, the crack, But what ends up happening is the 2002 Super Bowl in New Orleans, shortly before that, the NFL had awarded a Super Bowl to Detroit. And, I grew up in Michigan, I mentioned earlier. I had made a point to make sure that I introduced myself to the folks that were going to be running that event in Detroit. So within probably a year after the New Orleans Super Bowl ended in 2003, I was approached by the folks running the Super Bowl in Detroit and began the process of interviewing to possibly go to live and work there, which would have been closer to my family, which changed the scenery. Maybe that'll help me with getting my life back in order.
But it didn't.
No.
He gets the job. He's top man in the NFL, getting ready to run the Super Bowl at Ford Field, and then everything crashes in. What his life was like, what happened, is coming up next. And then at the end of our program, what his life is like now. You're a good man, Michael Jansen. Jesus loves you, and I'm so thankful to have you here. Pastor Reverend Dr. Hobo Harbert Hartwig, is in the house. Joe Mines from St. Gregory's. We're being produced by Eric and Maddie's dad, and we'll be back. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and this is Restoring Hope.
Here's Dan Celia with today's Stewardship Moment.
Listen to what Jesus said in Luke 17, 18, and 19. Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? You know, I think in these verses, you can almost hear the frustration in Jesus' voice for the sin of ingratitude. Do you go about your business and forget to give God praises for your ability to earn a living, to receive a paycheck? Let's not take for granted all the gifts that God has given us. Remember, it all comes from God, and as faithful stewards and servants, let's give Him the praise and the glory.
You've just heard a Stewardship Moment with Dan Celia of Financial Issues Ministry, helping you plan, give, and invest wisely. For more information, log on to financialissues.org. That's financialissues.org.
This moment of uncontrollable laughter was made possible by a 32-year-old man with little to no coordination attempting to execute a simple cartwheel. His name is Sergeant Warner, but young James, our laughing friend here, simply calls him Dad. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
The Pocket Testament League presents Pocket Power. Read, carry, and share the gospel every day. There's no easier way to share your faith than by giving someone a free gift, the Word of God in a compact, pocket-sized gospel.
I'm in a nursing home ministry. My main thrust is for them to get the gospel message. I've used the Gospel of John booklets here, and when we travel or go out to eat.
This is Mike Brickley, president of the Pocket Testament League. League members have found that any place is a good place to share a pocket gospel with someone they meet. Join us, and you'll always be ready. Is there anything more important?
I'm so thankful I have the opportunity to share, and I praise God for the ministry that makes it possible for me. I also ride with the Christian Motorcycle Association, and we're taking these out when we ride.
What are you waiting for? Read, carry, and share the gospel every day. For more information, call 1-800-636-8785 or visit pocketpower.org. That's pocketpower.org.
So, I'm a dog, and I'm kind of new to this family, but I've noticed a trend. My humans do this thing where they go around and get all my toys and hide them in this basket, but it's always the same basket, and it's always the same place, and then they act so surprised when I find them, but I'm like, hello, that's where you put it last time. Humans are the worst at hide and go seek.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
This is John Vodder with Not Alone. Here is another testimony of God at work.
My struggle with drugs started in junior high with pot. I was always shy, and doing drugs helped me fit in. Then in college, I tried cocaine, and the first time scared me, but the feeling was incredible, and I moved on to heroin. After that, it seemed like nothing else mattered. Fighting with my dad, stealing from my grandparents. Everyone wrote me off, and my chances were all used up. At 19, I went to rehab, and I've been in and out of 5 of them in the last 8 years. Then a friend heard Not Alone on this radio station. I went to lighthousenetwork.org, and the care guide there found me the help I so desperately needed. I'm now getting my life back together, one step at a time, and so can you.
If you or someone you love needs help today, remember you're not alone. Go to lighthousenetwork.org and find help now.
Restoring hope, open my heart to sing, taking the darkness inside, revealing your light, restoring hope.
He's at the pinnacle of his career. He's about to work for the biggest show in town, the Super Bowl, Ford Field. Mike Jansen is drinking. He's smoking crack cocaine. His life with his wife is anything but a happy life, but he's risen to the top of his domain. Men, can you relate? The things that we abuse, the things that we refuse, the things that we do to make ourselves in an earthly matter the biggest show in town. And then God walks in and makes sure he reminds us that he is in charge of us, not ourselves. So give me a year for the Super Bowl at Ford Field.
So I moved to Detroit. So I do get that job. In fact, the person that hires me is a gentleman by the name of Roger Penske, who is the chairman of our host committee.
The Roger Penske.
Yeah,
Roger
he's a big
Penske.
deal.
Yeah. So he was the the Ford family chose him. He's a Detroit resident. He's lived there for I think 30 years or so. So that's where he has his businesses. Ford family asked him to be the chairman of it. And if you know anything about Roger, is even at the age of 70 plus, the guy barely sleeps. I mean, he is who he is because of his work ethic. And Detroit was a hard town to get things done in for a Super Bowl. There was just so many things that needed to be done. You go and you move and you do an event in New Orleans where the hotels, 24,000 hotel rooms are within a 9-block radius. We're in Detroit. They're spread out. You have a downtown that's been neglected for 30 years. Just a lot of challenges. Oh, and on top of that, it's February in Detroit and the snow factor. Roger just wanted everything to go smooth, and that meant an awful lot of work. So 3 years out, we're already working 70, 80-hour weeks.
Wow.
And again,
3 years out.
3 years out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lining up sponsors.
Yeah, I mean, that was
hotel rooms.
Yeah, that was not necessarily my job to raise the money. My job was to put the operational plan together. I was senior vice president of operations, so I was the operations guy. And if you know anything about Roger, that's logistics. That's how he has made his careers in logistics, whether it's his race cars or his car dealerships or Penske truck and Penske. So he wanted to know the little details of everything we were doing, which is a great thing because that Super Bowl went off without a hitch. But
now, take me to what was it, 72 hours before Super Bowl that God smacked you upside the head?
No, it was the Thursday before Super Bowl week starts.
Okay.
So everything points to that week of Super Bowl. Okay. So that 3-year period, I'm hired to do one job, and that's to prepare for the day that the media start to arrive in your city, and then the teams arrive when the two teams. So it was... where my world kind of came crashing down was the Thursday, the weekend before the teams would arrive on Sunday night.
Okay, what happened?
So the teams have been identified too?
Teams have been identified, and at the height of this is how bad it had actually gotten.
You don't know football very well, do you? The Thursday before Super Bowl, we don't know.
No, the Thursday the week before.
Right.
The Thursday the full week before.
Right. So who was it?
Well, it was Seattle and Pittsburgh.
Right.
And Pittsburgh. And this is how bad it had
Did you know that?
No, go ahead.
Wait, you didn't know that, did you? All right, so I'm not the only one. Go ahead.
All right.
Well,
give me a break, jeez.
So there's things that we would do as a host committee to plan for once you find out who the two teams are. Immediately they send in a delegation of folks to look at your team hotel, your practice facilities, and all of those things. And the evening that we found out, and they flew in the next day. We had meetings scheduled, and that night, this is about 3 or 4 days before the actual overdose. I made a choice even that night to basically call in sick that night, stay up in my hotel room, and get high all night. So here I am, three years in the making to put this event on. We find out who the teams are, and I make a choice. I am so I am so addicted to with the crack that I make a choice that evening to call in sick essentially and get high in my hotel room instead of go meet the teams that we're here to welcome. That's how far that drug had taken me.
But it takes you one step lower.
Yeah. So we're on the Thursday the week before Super Bowl week. Had some late night meetings. About 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, I went. I had a place where I would go to get my drugs. It was a housing project 4 or 5 blocks away from the stadium. Kind of had I would just drive through, roll down my window, and they would we exchange the money for the drugs. Didn't ever look at it. Got back to the office that evening. Started to go back to work. Got a little restless. Went to go look to see. I was going to go ahead and take a hit, if you want to call it that. And I went to open up the package, and it wasn't what it normally was. It was powder. So, the kind of guy that I am, being an addict, I just said, okay, whatever. Went and found a straw in the workroom, the break room, and I snorted it. And didn't know at the time, but it had a combination of fentanyl, heroin and cocaine in it. And within
Joe, what's that mean?
Yeah,
that's a lot of opiates right there.
Yeah,
that's a pretty dangerous.
What's
mix.
that mean?
Bob, is that a
Opiates?
Heroin?
Heroin?
That's
Yeah,
an
what's that
opiate.
mean?
Heroin and cocaine is a speedball, and that really is going to play with you big time because you're doing stimulants and depressants at the same time.
Yeah, and he wasn't aware of it.
Okay, so what if I were to take a hit off that? What would my reaction be?
Well, I don't know what
Why
you
don't
would
you?
be.
He's about to tell you.
Yeah,
But everybody has a different
what's the
reaction to it, right?
euphoria?
Yeah.
About 10 seconds, you'll find out.
Yeah, it, within 10 seconds, I knew something was wrong, and somehow I was able to make I just remember feeling kind of feeling. The next thing I know is I woke up in a hospital bed, looking up and having my wife basically say, "Stay awake, stay awake, stay awake." So basically, what I found out later is I made it all the way down the hall to kind of our lounge break room where we had lounge furniture in there, and I collapsed on a piece of lounge furniture. This would have been about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening. The next morning, around 7 a.m., one of my coworkers, one of the guys I hired to come and be one of my transportation guys, found me with barely breathing. And
So 7 hours later, did you do the whole thing, or did you just take that one hit?
About 3 lines, if I remember correctly.
So 8 hours later, you're almost dead.
Yep.
Man, that's a powerful hit. Does that tell you how powerful a hit that is?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in the hospital. Your wife's saying, "Stay with us." What happens?
Again, a lot of this is really foggy, and all I'm doing is now now that I've gone through the amends process and everything, people have told me and filled in the blanks. But essentially, I was forced to be truthful for the first time when I came to. The doctors had already shared with my family and with my wife first, what they found in my system. She had no idea that I was using and abusing drugs. She had no idea. She knew that I was drinking too much, but she had no idea. What ends up happening at the time, didn't know it at the time, but the hospital became a really my wife finally came, started to talk about openly with my family, what a bad husband I was, how I had neglected her for years, drinking too much. And of course, family members tend to take your side. So it became kind of she pointing fingers at me and my family defending me. And it was just really, from what I understand today, it was a pretty ugly situation.
That can't be pretty. When did you face Roger Penske?
Well, what happened was one of my coworkers actually searched my vehicle, okay, and they found paraphernalia. So they already knew. I didn't know at the time that they knew that I was using drugs.
Okay.
So I had a choice to make, and for one of the first times in my life, I was truthful when I was asked by Roger and my boss Susan whether or not I had used drugs. I said yes, and they had already made their mind up that they were going to honor my employment contract and continue to pay me. So I made that first choice to be truthful, and it actually ended up being a benefit. So I had a chance to tell Roger. He said some very encouraging words. This was really what I needed to hear. And so then the Monday of Super Bowl week, I get shipped off to a treatment center of my choice. So I'm in the treatment center the week Super Bowl's going on.
Wow.
And for how long are you in a treatment center?
For 6 months.
Okay. I'm going to run this thing forward a little bit because when we come back, we need to start talking about what your life is like now.
Yep.
But this was not the lowest point. It may have been politically and career-wise.
Right.
But you come off of that treatment center and it didn't stick, did it?
No. It got a lot darker.
Got a lot darker.
Yeah.
All right. When we come back, and we will have only about 8 minutes, I promise you're going to hear the end of this story. Basically, where I want to start is that you had lost your wife. You had lost everything in the world. Your family was not supportive of you at that time. You end up in Des Moines, Iowa with certainly a job way below your pay grade, but it's a good job. And you hit bottom again, and a saint comes into your life and saves you. She may have been an angel. We're just not sure yet. We'll talk about that when we come back. I'm J. Michael McCoy, and if I haven't told you lately, thanks for listening. I love this job, and I couldn't do it without you. Myself, Dr. Hartwig, Joe Meintz, Bob Montserrat, Chris and Eric producing today. Our special guest, Mike Jansen, on RestoringHopeLive.com. Check out all of our shows at RestoringHopeLive.com. And do me a favor, pray for this ministry. We could certainly use your prayers. Addiction treatment is all the same. Whether you're addicted to pornography or whether you're addicted to Miller beer, there's still addiction. And I've got Joe Mites here from St. Gregory's. And if everything's an addiction treatment, then why are shows like this so important for St. Gregory to be around?
That's a really good question, because this format really talks about those issues that people are struggling with. What we're really dealing with when we talk about addictions treatment is really getting to those core fundamental issues that are really throwing confusion into people's lives about what's my purpose, how did I get here, what do I do from here, and that's really what we find leads to an addiction. That's a big point for us.
You know, I know that at the end of my addiction, when I was either going to choose to live or die, one of the questions that came out, because I did have a spiritual relationship with God at the time, I didn't know Jesus this well, but I kept saying, what's my purpose? Why am I here? I'm 40-something years old. I've had my kids. I've made money. My wife's okay. Why are you keeping me around?
That's what's really surprising for people as they go through the St. Gregory program, is what the program's really focused on isn't so much about putting Band-Aids on things and helping you find momentary, fleeting bits of happiness or pleasure. We're really breaking down what does it look like to obtain true happiness and true joy. We're really making an effort to help people heal completely from the inside out and help them to reach a higher goal as opposed to just being sober. We're not looking at sobriety as the end goal. We're looking at your life. We're really looking at the big things that you really want to accomplish, not to help not do.
Yeah, because if you're not sober, if you're alcoholic or addicted to drugs or depression medicine or anything like that, you really can't get to start.
That's right. You'll see someone come out of a recovery program when sobriety is their primary focus in life. That's the end game. And they get there and, well, nothing really comes from just sobriety, and they start thinking, is this it? Well, no. The whole point is that's not it. The point is, let's go and achieve things with the rest of your life. Let's really be involved and engaged in those things that really are going to bring you happiness and joy. And that's a very different approach. We really want to make sure that people are grasping this idea that life is very big, and it can be very big for them. And they've come to this point where all they understand is this little world of being caught in the cycle of addiction and dependencies. We're helping to break that, not just for the sake of breaking addiction and dependencies, but so they can go on and live out their life with purpose and meaning.
Yeah, I hear so many people talk about after they get sober and after the desire to drink or drug or whatever is lifted from them, then they realize how messed up their life is.
That's exactly right.
They've been swallowing it and burying it, and they can't feel the pain. And when they begin to feel the pain, that's when somebody like St. Gregory's can come in and, literally one hand at a time, pull them out of that dark hole.
That's right. What St. Gregory Retreat Center does, we're going to start from the beginning. We're going to really get a full understanding of what's truly going on here. And by that, I'm not talking about, well, you drink too much or you're using drugs. The real problem is what is the emotional turmoil that's really causing you to respond to life in an unhealthy way? How do we help you to challenge those beliefs that you may have about yourself in a way that helps you not to just move on with life and not be reactive to things, but truly understand the real logic behind why are you believing what you're believing? How are you really pursuing a life of joy and happiness?
All right, how do we get a hold of St. Gregory's?
You can get a hold of St. Gregory's at 888-778-5833. Our counselors are always available. That's 888-778-5833. The website is stgregoryctr.com, and you can just do a Google search for St. Gregory Retreat Center, and that'll come right up.
Restoring hope, open my heart to sing, taking the darkness inside, revealing your light, restoring hope.
It's 10 before the top of the hour on this 9th day of June in the Lord's year 2013. I'm J. Michael McCoy. Thanks for joining us on RestoringHopeLive.com this week. We hope you enjoy the program. You can check us out at our website, RestoringHopeLive.com. Next week Our own Bob Montserrat, who is a forensic scientist by profession, is going to talk to us about how Jesus walked him through the Hurricane Katrina, Flight 232 in Sioux City, and most importantly, how he met God in the midst of 9/11. Bob goes to all these crisis places and helps with the dead bodies. His story's next week. That'll be a great Father's Day here live on RestoringHopeLive.com, brought to you by St. Gregory's Retreat Centers. All right, Michael Jansen, you have just been fired by Mr. Penske, and you have gone through 6 months of treatment in which you completed, clean, sober. You moved to Des Moines, Iowa for a job, but you fall off the wagon and you fall off hard. You steal from family members, from loved ones. You do whatever it takes to not only get back into the alcohol and drugs hardcore.
Yep.
Then a saint walks into your life. And I just happen to know the date because Mike and I share these dates. But in June of 2007, this woman who certainly loved you a lot more than you loved her at the time, if I can boldly say that, looked at you and said what?
Well, I was giving her every reason why recovery hadn't worked for me. And basically, she kind of called me out on it. She used a word that I can't really repeat over the radio, but she said, you're full of blank.
Okay.
And she said, why don't you just get back to Alcoholics Anonymous? Give recovery a chance. Do the work. I believe today that was God speaking through her, because that was my sobriety date. That night I went to a meeting. That night I called that sponsor that I had first asked to be my sponsor when I first moved here, when I was sober after treatment. And I began the work of recovery, and that,
in the rooms of 12 steps.
That's correct. That's correct.
Must have worked, because a year later in November, you and your bride, you and your saint became you and your wife.
Yeah. Yeah. She gave me a chance to spend a lifetime with her, and I feel truly, truly blessed. She is, I tell people, anybody who asks me, I believe that God sent her in my life for a purpose.
Yep.
We agreed that I had to get a year sobriety under my belt before I would even consider asking her to marry me, and I did that. And that's not why I did it.
Well, but it's a nice little motivator.
Yeah, sure. And
mine was a Ferrari.
So yeah, we were married in the church that we became members together at, and she will tell you that while I was out doing what I do, I had met her when I first moved to Des Moines, and then I shut her out of my life and chose drugs over her. She will tell you that while I was out there doing what I was doing, she found the Lord. She found Jesus Christ and was born again at the church that we both go to and members of today. And she tells me that if Jesus wouldn't have filled her heart up, she was going to basically kick me out to the curb and basically send me back to Michigan, at the age of 35 to go live with mom and dad.
Yeah.
She'll tell you
Because you
that
had
today.
nothing. And
I had nothing.
And is it fair to say you were kind of unemployable in your field of choice?
Oh, for sure. My world in sports was pretty small, and everybody knew. They had formed their own conclusions on what had happened to me. Some of it was true, and some of it was worse than true.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Looking back today, I don't know if I would have had a spot in sports. I don't know.
So your wife finds Jesus. When do you find him?
I find it. I began to ask the Lord back in my life. In the treatment center, I began prayer again.
Okay.
But what really transformed my heart, and when I really became convicted that I could live out God's will for me, was going through the process of those 12 steps.
Mm-hmm.
Was cleaning up the things that I had done. Because what happened for me, this is just my experience.
And it's really not about 12 steps. It's about, and Joe, you and I have talked about this, it's about getting to the person that God wants you to be.
That's right.
For me, it was reconciling the things that I had done and giving those to God, taking some actions to make them right if I could, and then never looking back, just moving forward and trying to live out the life that God intended me to do. But I couldn't do that until I had reconciled my past, because I had done a lot of things that I had never spoke of, that I had never told anybody, and spoke them out loud, prayed God, and asked him for forgiveness.
Yeah, and we should make the point that the day after the overdose, his first wife left, moved to Florida. He saw her twice after that. Once was signing the divorce papers, but the second time was when you made amends to her.
Yeah, the second time was being directed by a sponsor of when I was ready to go take responsibility for my part in that broken marriage. And I did that. When I was ready, and I didn't know when I was ready, so I had somebody have to tell me in early sobriety, yeah, I think you're ready. So I had rehearsed everything that I needed to say to her. Basically what it boiled down to was just simply that I was not a good husband. I was not the man that you married.
And how did she accept that?
She had enough time, I think, for her to process it in her own way. And the only thing, it's really interesting to me today, the only thing she wanted to know was when was the first time I chose to use a drug in New Orleans? Because I had lied so many times to her, she didn't know what the truth was.
Well, and she needed it for her own timeline, right?
Yeah.
Doc?
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
she didn't know what to trust you, but she sensed that you were being honest at that point.
Yeah, I think maybe for the first time she felt that I wasn't, full of it. That something maybe something.
Is there freedom
different.
that I'm sensing? There's a lot of freedom that comes with that when you kind of open up. Is that? Can you
it's total freedom. Is
kind of hard to explain how life changing it is.
When you take action to make the effort to right a wrong,
right,
and are fully prepared for whatever that other person you wronged is going to have to say, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. But once you take the action, you're free from it, and I don't have to walk around anywhere in America or in the world for that matter and be worried about running into somebody that I had wronged before.
Yeah,
I don't have that to deal with anymore for the fear.
Right.
The fear.
And when you make an amend there, you never can say, well, if you wouldn't have done that.
Right.
I mean, it's 100%. Even if they say it's all your fault, you say, yeah, it is.
Yeah, responsibility.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about responsibility.
So what's your life like today? You're still with that beautiful saint of a woman?
Yeah, I am. I'm truly blessed.
Yes, you are.
My wife and I we're happily married. God has blessed us with a 3-year-old daughter that just never thought the first marriage, and we didn't have children, and I never thought those would be in the cards for me to have.
Yeah, I know. You got a blessed life, dude. He's also got a great business that he's built with his brother, a relationship that he repaired, and I want you to know that all stories could end like this. If you said at any point in the middle of this story, oh, shoot, that's me. I hide liquor so my wife doesn't know. Or if you're buying drugs through a window of a car, you don't think your neighbor doesn't know? People know. And most importantly, God sees it. So stop hiding from God. He loves you unconditionally. His voice does not say you're a bad person for using drugs. His voice says, I love you no matter what you do, and through my son you'll get forgiveness. He doesn't say, I'm ashamed of the type of husband you are. He says, through me you can be the greatest husband that Christ ever was for the church and his bride. But you have to seek it. You have to seek him. You have to seek help. You have to seek treatment. And most importantly, you have to surrender. Mike, thanks for coming in today. I love your story, man. It's just great. Dr. Pastor Michael Rabbi Hartwig, thanks for being here today. You'll be gone next week, as will Joe Mines. So Bob will be here, and we're going to hear some of his fantastic stories. Wait till you hear the moment he walks into, was it St. Paul's in New York?
St. Paul's Chapel, yes.
Wait till you hear. I'm going to tease you. Next week, when he walks into St. Paul's, you're going to get goosebumps. Until then, happy Father's Day coming up. Remember, God loves you, and you are made to be what he created you to be, and that's his child. Just pray.